Hello and welcome to Cheating Tales Lab. We're so grateful you're here. Let's kick things off with today's story. Roderick Barber's heavy boots thudded against the driveway as he climbed out of his truck. The 24-hour shift at the fire station had left him bone-weary, but there was a quiet satisfaction in his exhaustion. Lives saved, property protected. It was what he'd signed up for. He trudged to the mailbox, rifling through the usual stack of bills and junk mail. An unfamiliar cream-colored envelope caught his eye, addressed to his wife Stacy in flowing script. Curiosity prickled at the back of his neck. Inside, he tossed his keys on the counter and stood in the silent kitchen. The envelope felt heavy in his hands. Without hesitation, he carefully opened the flap. The letter inside made his blood run cold. My dearest Stacy, the memory of our last stolen moment sustains me in this hellhole. I count the days until I can hold you in my arms again, feel your soft skin against mine. Our love is the only thing that keeps me going in here. I dream of the future we'll have together once I'm out. No more hiding, no more lies. Just you and me, baby. We'll leave this town in our rearview mirror and never look back. Remember, only a few more months until I'm free. Stay strong, my love. Soon, we'll have our happily ever after. Forever yours, Carlton. Roderick's jaw clenched, his fingers tightening on the paper until it crumpled. The betrayal hit him like a sucker punch, leaving him winded. But as the initial shock faded, a cold determination settled in its place. He smoothed out the letter, carefully refolding it and sliding it back into the envelope. His mind raced, piecing together the implications. Carlton, an inmate. Stacy, a liar, a cheat. Their entire marriage a sham. But Roderick Barber wasn't a man who acted on impulse. No, he'd get to the bottom of this. He'd uncover every dirty secret before confronting Stacy. And when he did, he'd be armed with the full, ugly truth. Over the next few days, Roderick became a ghost in his own home. He moved silently, gathering evidence while maintaining a facade of normalcy. Stacy, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath her husband's calm exterior, continued her daily routine. Late one night, while Stacy slept, Roderick sat bathed in the blue glow of her laptop screen. His fingers flew over the keys, bypassing her weak password and delving into years of deception. Email after email unfolded before him, each one a dagger to his heart. My darling Carlton, I lied to Roderick again today. Told him I had a staff meeting when really I was coming to see you. It's getting easier each time. He's so trusting, so blind. Sometimes I almost feel bad for him. Almost. I can't wait until you're out. We'll finally be together, without bars or guards between us. Just a little longer, my love. Yours always, Stacy. Roderick's face remained impassive as he dug deeper. Phone records revealed countless calls to the prison. Bank statements showed suspicious withdrawals, money funneled to Carlton's commissary account, no doubt. But the final blow came when he uncovered Stacy's volunteer records at the prison. She'd been going there for years, using her position as a high school guidance counselor to gain access. All those family emergencies and work crises, lies, every single one. As dawn broke, Roderick sat back, his eyes burning from lack of sleep but his mind crystal clear. He had all the pieces now. It was time to confront the woman who'd made a mockery of their marriage. Roderick heard Stacy's car pull into the driveway. He remained seated at the kitchen table, the damning evidence spread before him. His heart hammered in his chest, but his face betrayed nothing. The front door opened. Rod? You home? Stacy called out, her voice sickeningly sweet. In here, he replied, his tone flat. Stacy breezed into the kitchen, her smile faltering as she took in the scene. What's all this? Roderick met her gaze, his eyes cold. Why don't you tell me, Stacy? She glanced at the papers, recognition dawning. For a moment, fear flashed across her face. Then, like a switch being flipped, her demeanor changed entirely. Well, she said, a cruel smirk twisting her lips, I guess the cat's out of the bag. How long? Roderick asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Stacy laughed, the sound grating against his ears. Years, Rod. God, you're so oblivious. It was almost too easy. And Carlton? He's in prison. What the hell were you thinking? She leaned against the counter, crossing her arms. I was thinking that I was bored out of my mind. Carlton's exciting, dangerous. Everything you're not. Roderick's hands clenched into fists, but he kept his composure. So our entire marriage has been a lie? Oh, don't be so dramatic. Stacy rolled her eyes. It wasn't all bad. You're stable, dependable. The perfect cover while I had my fun. And now? Roderick asked, his voice eerily calm. Stacy's eyes gleamed with malice. Now? Now I'm done playing house. Carlton gets out soon, and we're leaving. Together. She laughed again, the sound dripping with disdain. Did you really think someone like me would be satisfied with someone like you forever? You're so boring, Rod. So predictable. Roderick stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. Get out, he said. Excuse me? Stacy's eyes widened in disbelief. You heard me. Get out. Now. Stacy's face contorted with rage. You can't just throw me out. This is my house too. Not anymore, Roderick replied, his resolve unwavering. I want you gone within the hour. Take what you can carry. The rest, I'll have sent to wherever you end up. You'll regret this, Stacy hissed, her mask of superiority cracking. I'll take you for everything in the divorce. You'll have nothing when I'm done with you. Roderick didn't flinch. We'll see about that. Now, get out of my sight. Stacy stormed out of the kitchen, hurling insults over her shoulder. Roderick remained standing, listening to her rage through the house, gathering her things. As the front door slammed shut, Roderick finally allowed himself to sink back into his chair. The house echoed with silence, but for the first time in years, it felt like he could breathe. He looked at the scattered evidence of Stacy's betrayal, his jaw set with determination. She thought she'd won, that she'd break him. But Roderick Barber was far from broken. This was just the beginning. He'd weather this storm, and he'd come out stronger on the other side. Let Stacy and Carlton have their delusions of victory. Roderick knew the truth. The real battle was just beginning, and he was more than ready for war. Weeks crawled by like molasses, each day a reminder of Stacy's betrayal. Roderick threw himself into his work, finding solace in the structured chaos of the firehouse. He'd purged the house of Stacy's presence, but her shadow lingered in every corner. The shrill chime of the doorbell cut through the silence of a lazy Sunday afternoon. Roderick's eyes flicked to his phone, connected to the Ring camera he'd installed after Stacy's departure. His jaw clenched at the sight on the screen. Carlton Hebert stood on his porch, a menacing grin stretched across his face. The ex-gon's prison-honed muscles strained against a too-tight t-shirt, a pitiful attempt at intimidation. In his right hand, a knife glinted in the afternoon sun. Roderick remained calm. He'd prepared for this moment, run through the scenarios 100 times in his head. With deliberate movements, he activated the silent alarm he'd had installed and hit record on his phone. He opened the door, careful to maintain the chain lock. Can I help you? Carlton's grin widened, revealing yellowed teeth. Yeah, you can get the fuck out of my house. Roderick raised an eyebrow. Your house? I think you're confused, friend. This is my property. You're trespassing. Listen here, you piece of shit. Carlton snarled, brandishing the knife. Stacy told me all about you. The boring, predictable Boy Scout. Well, playtime's over. She's with a real man now. Roderick's voice remained steady, betraying none of the disgust roiling in his gut. I'm going to say this once, Carlton. You're violating your parole by being here with a weapon. The police are already on their way. I suggest you leave before they arrive. Panic flashed in Carlton's eyes, quickly replaced by impotent rage. This ain't over, firefighter. I'm gonna ruin your fucking life. You're welcome to try, Roderick replied, his tone icy. Now get off my property before I add assault to your charges. Carlton spat on the porch, a glob of phlegm landing inches from Roderick's feet. He backed away, knife still clutched in his sweaty palm. Watch your back, asshole. You don't know who you're messing with. Roderick watched impassively as Carlton skulked off, his bravado evaporating with each step. Only when the ex-gon's car peeled away did Roderick allow himself a smile. Round one to him. He replayed the recording, satisfaction coursing through him. Another piece of evidence for the inevitable legal battle to come. Stacy and her low-life boyfriend had no idea what they were up against. In a dingy apartment across town, Stacy paced like a caged animal. The place reeked of stale cigarettes and broken dreams, a far cry from the comfortable life she'd thrown away. Carlton lounged on a threadbare couch, eyes glued to a small TV playing reruns of some mindless reality show. "Would you sit down already? You're making me dizzy." Stacy whirled on him, eyes flashing. "Sit down? How can you be so calm? That bastard made a fool of you." Carlton's face darkened. "Watch your tone, babe. Nobody makes a fool of me." "Really?" Stacy sneered. "Because from where I'm standing, Roderick played you like a fiddle. Some big, bad ex-con you are." In a flash, Carlton was on his feet, meaty hand wrapped around Stacy's throat. "I told you to watch your fucking mouth." Stacy's eyes widened, fear replacing the contempt. She'd seen this side of Carlton before, but always through the safety of prison visiting room glass. Now, with his fingers digging into her flesh, the reality of her choices came crashing down. Carlton released her, shoving her away. "You want revenge on your Boy Scout? Fine, but we do it my way." Stacy rubbed her neck, a plan forming in her mind. "I know how to hit him where it hurts." His precious reputation. The next day, Stacy's Honda Civic crept into the parking lot of Fire Station 12. She peered through binoculars, watching the comings and goings of the firefighters. There, she hissed, spotting Roderick climbing into a fire engine. "They're leaving for a call. Now's our chance." Carlton grunted, pulling a small bag of white powder from his pocket. "You sure this'll work?" Stacy's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Trust me. Once they find drugs in his locker, St. Roderick's halo will slip real quick." They slipped into the station, Stacy's old key card granting them access. The locker room was deserted, rows of identical metal doors lining the walls. "Which one's his?" Carlton muttered. Stacy pointed. "Third from the left." "Hurry up." Carlton fumbled with the lock, cursing under his breath. Finally, it swung open. He reached in, ready to plant the drugs. A small red light blinked in the corner of the locker. Carlton froze. "What the fuck is that?" Stacy's blood ran cold. "A camera. That son of a bitch." Before they could react, sirens wailed in the distance. Panic seized them both. "Run!" Stacy shrieked, bolting for the exit. They barely made it to the car before police cruisers swarmed the parking lot. As they peeled away, Stacy's nails dug into the steering wheel. She'd underestimated Roderick. Again. Across town, Roderick sat in Chief Wallace's office, a laptop open between them. The footage from his locker camera played on repeat, crystal-clear images of Stacy and Carlton's botched frame job. Chief Wallace shook his head, disgust evident on his weathered face. "I can't believe it, Barber. Your own wife." Roderick's voice was steady. "Ex-wife, sir. And believe me, I'm as shocked as you are." "Well, you did good installing that camera. Hate to think what might have happened otherwise." The chief leaned back, fixing Roderick with a stern gaze. "You sure you're okay to work? Nobody would blame you for taking some time off." Roderick met his eyes, unflinching. "With all due respect, Chief, work is the only thing keeping me sane right now. I need to be here." Wallace nodded, a hint of pride in his eyes. "All right then, I'll send this footage to the police. They'll want to question you, but it's clear as day what happened here." As Roderick left the office, a commotion erupted in the station. Raised voices, heavy footsteps. He rounded the corner to find two uniformed officers leading a handcuffed Carlton through the bay doors. Their eyes met, Carlton's filled with impotent rage. "This ain't over, fireman. You hear me? This ain't fucking over." Roderick watched him passively as they shoved Carlton into a cruiser. Another piece falling into place. He allowed himself a small smile. Let them come. He was ready. The klaxon blared through the firehouse, jolting Roderick from a fitful sleep. He was on his feet in seconds, muscle memory taking over as he donned his turnout gear. "We've got a big one, folks." Chief Wallace's voice boomed over the intercom. "Factory fire on the east side, potential chemical involvement. Let's move." Roderick's mind snapped into focus, personal troubles evaporating in the face of duty. As he climbed aboard Engine 12, a hand clapped his shoulder. "You good, Barber?" It was Mike Sanderson, his lieutenant and closest friend on the force. Roderick nodded, jaw set. Always. The scene that greeted them was chaos incarnate. Flames licked the night sky, turning the industrial complex into a vision of hell. Thick, acrid smoke billowed from shattered windows, carrying God knows what toxins. Chief Wallace's voice crackled over the radio. "Engine 12, we've got reports of workers trapped on the 3rd floor. East Wing. Get in there and get them out." "Copy that," Sanderson replied. He turned to his team, eyes locking with Roderick's. "Barber, you're with me. The rest of you, lay lines and prepare for ventilation." Roderick moved without hesitation, SCBA mask in place as they entered the inferno. The heat was oppressive, visibility near zero. But this he understood. This was where he thrived. They found the workers huddled in a break room, terror etched on their soot-streaked faces. Roderick's voice was calm, authoritative. "Fire department, we're here to get you out. Stay low and follow us." As they led the group towards safety, a thunderous crack split the air. Roderick's head snapped up, years of experience screaming danger. "Floor's giving way," he shouted. "Move, move, move." He shoved the nearest worker forward, just as a section of ceiling collapsed. Debris rained down, a burning beam catching Sanderson across the back. The lieutenant went down hard, cry of pain lost in the roar of the flames. Without thinking, Roderick hauled him up, slinging Sanderson's arm over his shoulder. "Like hell I'm leaving you behind," he grunted, half dragging his friend towards the exit. They emerged into the night air, Roderick's lungs burning as he gulped in oxygen. Paramedics swarmed them, whisking Sanderson away on a stretcher. For hours, they battled the blaze. Roderick moved like a man possessed, barking orders and diving back into the flames again and again. When the last hot spot was finally extinguished, he stood amidst the smoldering ruins, exhausted but victorious. Chief Wallace approached, face etched with equal parts concern and admiration. "Hell of a job in there, Barber. You saved a lot of lives tonight." Roderick nodded, too spent for words. As the adrenaline faded, the weight of everything, Stacy's betrayal, Carlton's threats, the near disaster of the fire, came crashing down. He felt a hand on his arm and turned to find the entire crew of Engine 12 gathered around him. Mike Sanderson, arm in a sling, stepped forward. "We heard about what's been going on, Rod," he said, voice gruff with emotion. "We want you to know, we've got your back." "Always." Roderick looked at the faces of his brothers, seeing nothing but unwavering support. For the first time in weeks, he felt the ice around his heart begin to thaw. "Thanks," he managed, voice thick. That means a lot." As dawn broke over the smoky horizon, Roderick stood a little straighter. Let Stacy and Carlton plot their pathetic schemes. He had a family right here, forged in fire and unwavering loyalty. Whatever storms lay ahead, he'd weather them. And he wouldn't do it alone. The fluorescent lights of the courthouse corridor buzzed like angry wasps, matching the tension in the air. Roderick Barber stood tall, his firefighter's uniform crisp and immaculate. Beside him, Ashley Chen cut a sharp figure in her tailored suit, a portfolio clutched in her manicured hands. At the far end of the hall, Stacy's shrill voice carried, "I want everything, Shelley. Every last penny. Bleed him dry." Roderick's jaw tightened, but he betrayed no other emotion. Ashley placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "We've got this, Rod. Trust me." The courtroom doors swung open, and the battle lines were drawn. Shelley Sharp lived up to her name, all razor edges and shark-like grins. She strode to the plaintiff's table, Stacy in tow like a preening peacock. "Your Honor," Shelley began, her voice dripping with false sincerity, "my client, Mrs. Barber, has suffered greatly at the hands of her soon-to-be ex-husband. She seeks only what is rightfully hers, half of all marital assets, including Mr. Barber's pension." The judge, a stern-faced woman with steel-gray hair, turned to Ashley. "And the defense?" Ashley rose, calm and collected. "Your Honor, we contest Mrs. Barber's claims entirely. Moreover, we have extensive evidence of Mrs. Barber's infidelity, financial misconduct, and recent criminal activities that directly impact this case. Stacy's smug expression faltered. Shelley Sharp's eyes narrowed. Objection. Shelley snapped. This is nothing but character assassination. The judge held up a hand. I'll hear the evidence, counselor. Proceed, Ms. Chun. For the next hour, Ashley methodically laid out their case. Bank statements showing mysterious withdrawals. Phone records documenting years of deception. The damning footage from the fire station, catching Stacy and Carlton red-handed in their attempted frame-up. With each piece of evidence, Stacy seemed to shrink in her seat. Shelley Sharp's aggressive tactics fell flat in the face of Ashley's meticulous preparation. And finally, Your Honor, Ashley concluded, we have Mr. Barber's own testimony. Despite Mrs. Barber's betrayal and criminal actions, he seeks only a fair division of assets. He does not wish to leave her destitute, merely to protect what he has rightfully earned. The judge's penetrating gaze swept the courtroom, lingering on Stacy's now pale face. I've seen enough. This court finds in favor of the defendant, Mr. Barber. Mrs. Barber's claims are dismissed in their entirety. Mr. Barber will retain all assets in his name, including his pension. Mrs. Barber is entitled only to personal effects still in the marital home. The gavel's crack was like thunder in the stunned silence. Stacy's wail of outrage pierced the air. This isn't fair. He can't just. Mrs. Barber. The judge's voice cut through her protests. I suggest you leave quietly before I hold you in contempt. And Miss Sharp, I'll be referring this case to the Bar Association for review of your tactics. As Stacy was ushered out, still shrieking, Roderick allowed himself a small smile. Round one of the reckoning was complete. The school board meeting room hummed with tension. Angry parents packed shoulder to shoulder. At the front, Roderick sat calmly, a folder of documents on the table before him. Board President Margaret Holloway called for order, her voice strained. We're here to discuss the situation regarding Mrs. Stacy Barber's continued employment as a guidance counselor at Lincoln High School. A chorus of outraged voices rose. She's a criminal. How can we trust her with our children? Fire her immediately. Margaret raised her hands. Please, let's approach this rationally. Mrs. Barber is here to speak in her own defense. Stacy sauntered to the podium, a practiced smile plastered on her face. Her voice dripped with saccharine sweetness. I know there have been some misunderstandings, but I assure you, I am fully committed to the students of Lincoln High. My personal life has no bearing on my abilities as a counselor. A ripple of disbelief ran through the crowd. Roderick's hand tightened on the folder, but he held his peace. Not yet. Board member Tom Fitzgerald leaned forward. Mrs. Barber, how do you explain your relationship with a convicted felon? Your attempts to frame your ex-husband? These hardly seem like the actions of someone we can trust with impressionable teenagers. Stacy's smile never wavered. Those are private matters, blown out of proportion by a bitter ex-husband. I've done nothing wrong. The room erupted in angry shouts. Margaret banged her gavel. Order. Mr. Barber, you wish to address the board? Roderick stood, his presence commanding instant attention. Thank you, Madam President. I'll be brief. He opened the folder, withdrawing a stack of papers. What I have here are sworn statements from students at Lincoln High. Students who confided in Mrs. Barber about their own struggles with fidelity, with the law, with making ethical choices. Students who trusted her to guide them towards the right path. Stacy's practiced smile slipped. Roderick continued, his voice steady. These statements detail how Mrs. Barber counseled these students, how she encouraged them to lie, to cheat, to pursue their own selfish desires at the expense of others, how she used their confidences to manipulate them. The room fell deathly silent. I don't present these lightly, Roderick said, but as a member of this community, as someone who has sworn to protect and serve, I cannot in good conscience allow Mrs. Barber to continue in a position of trust and authority over our children. Stacy's composure cracked. You bastard, she shrieked. You have no right. Those brats came to me, whining about their pathetic little problems. I told them to grow up, to take what they wanted. That's the real world. The crowd recoiled in horror. Margaret's gavel thundered. Mrs. Barber, that is enough. But Stacy was beyond reason. You're all hypocrites, acting so high and mighty. I bet half of you are screwing around on your spouses too. Security, Margaret called. Remove Mrs. Barber immediately. As Stacy was dragged from the room, still hurling invectives, the board huddled in hurried conference. It took less than 5 minutes for Margaret to return to the microphone. In light of the evidence presented and Mrs. Barber's outburst, this board unanimously votes to terminate her employment, effective immediately. The room erupted in cheers. Roderick allowed himself a small nod of satisfaction. Another nail in the coffin of Stacy's delusions. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the fire station parking lot. Roderick emerged from the bay doors, conversation with his crew cut short by the sound of screeching tires. A battered Camaro skidded to a stop, Carlton A. Bear exploding from the driver's seat like a rabid dog. His eyes were wild, spittle flying from his lips as he charged across the asphalt. You ruined everything. You son of a bitch. Roderick's colleagues tensed, ready to intervene, but he held up a hand. I've got this. Carlton closed the distance, meaty fists swinging. But years of hauling hoses and climbing ladders had honed Roderick's reflexes to a razor's edge. He sidestepped the clumsy assault, using Carlton's momentum to send him stumbling. You're making a mistake, Carlton, Roderick said, voice calm. Walk away now, before you make things worse for yourself. But reason had no place in Carlton's rage-addled mind. He charged again, a bull to Roderick's matador. This time, Roderick didn't dodge. He met Carlton's rush head-on, years of firefighter training kicking in. In a fluid motion, Roderick trapped Carlton's arm, using the bigger man's weight against him. Carlton found himself face down on the pavement, arm twisted behind his back in a textbook hold. Stay down, Roderick growled. It's over. Carlton thrashed uselessly. I'll kill you. You hear me? I'll fucking kill you. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Stacy's car screeched into the lot, her face a mask of fury as she took in the scene. Let him go, you bastard. Roderick maintained his hold on Carlton, addressing them both. You know, I almost feel sorry for you too. So caught up in your own selfishness, you can't see the hole you've dug for yourselves. Police cruisers pulled in, officers spilling out with weapons drawn. But here's the thing, Roderick continued, his voice carrying across the lot. While you were plotting your petty revenge, I was busy. Those assets you thought you'd get in the divorce, Stacy? The money you were counting on, Carlton? It's gone. Stacy's eyes widened in horror. What are you talking about? Roderick allowed himself a smile. I donated it all. Every last penny to a charity that supports victims of domestic abuse and infidelity. Seems fitting, don't you think? Carlton let out a howl of rage, renewing his struggles. Roderick calmly handed him off to the approaching officers. You can't do that, Stacy shrieked. It's my money too. Not according to the courts, Roderick replied. You made your choices, Stacy. These are the consequences. As Carlton was cuffed and shoved into a cruiser, Stacy's shoulders slumped in defeat. The reality of her situation finally seemed to sink in. Roderick turned away, done with them both. He was met by a wall of his colleagues, faces shining with admiration and support. That was some fancy moves, Barber, Lieutenant Sanderson said, clapping him on the shoulder. Didn't know you had it in you. Roderick allowed himself a genuine smile. Neither did I, Mike. Neither did I. As the police cars pulled away, Stacy's wails fading into the distance, Roderick felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The storm had passed. He'd weathered it and come out stronger on the other side. His team surrounded him, a protective circle of brotherhood. Whatever came next, Roderick knew he wouldn't face it alone. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of wood smoke and possibility. Roderick Barber stood before a group of fresh-faced recruits, their eyes bright with anticipation and a touch of nervousness. Being a firefighter isn't just about running into burning buildings, Roderick began, his voice carrying easily across the training yard. It's about integrity. It's about standing tall when the world tries to knock you down. The recruits hung on his every word. In the months since the dust had settled on his personal drama, Roderick had become something of a legend in the department. Not for his battle with Stacy and Carlton, though those stories circulated in hushed whispers, but for his unwavering commitment to the job and his fellow firefighters. You'll face challenges in this career, he continued. Some will test your physical limits. Others will push you to your emotional breaking point. But remember this. Integrity is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. As he spoke, Roderick's mind drifted back over the tumultuous journey that had led him here. The betrayal, the anger, the moments of doubt, they had all shaped him, forged him into something stronger than he'd been before. When I joined the force, I thought I knew what resilience meant, Roderick said, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Turns out, I had a lot to learn. Life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. Your job is to stand your ground, no matter how hard the wind blows. The recruits nodded, soaking in his words. Roderick saw in their faces the same determination, the same desire to serve that had driven him all these years. Remember, he concluded, at the end of the day, it's not just about saving lives out there. It's about being someone worth saving, someone your team can rely on, no matter what. That's what being a firefighter really means. As the recruits filed out, Chief Wallace approached, a look of approval on his weathered face. Damn fine speech, Barber. You've got a real knack for this mentoring business. Roderick shrugged, a hint of embarrassment coloring his cheeks. Just trying to pass on what I've learned, Chief. Well, keep it up. These kids need role models like you. As the chief walked away, Roderick checked his watch. His heart quickened slightly. He had just enough time to shower and change before meeting Ashley for dinner. Their relationship had blossomed slowly, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared values. Ashley had seen him at his lowest, had stood by him through the storm, and now, as they explored this new chapter together, Roderick found himself looking forward to the future in a way he hadn't in years. Later, as they sat across from each other in a cozy Italian restaurant, Ashley's eyes sparkled in the candlelight. So, how did the new recruits like Firefighter Barber's words of wisdom? Roderick chuckled, taking a sip of wine. They seemed impressed. Or terrified. Hard to tell sometimes. Ashley laughed, the sound warming him more than any fire ever could. Well, you were pretty impressive. And maybe a little terrifying. As they talked and laughed, Roderick felt a profound sense of contentment wash over him. The betrayal that had once threatened to break him had instead opened the door to a life more fulfilling than he could have imagined. He had true friends, a job he loved, and a woman who saw him for who he really was. The road had been hard, the battles fierce, but as he looked into Ashley's eyes, Roderick knew he wouldn't change a thing. For in the crucible of adversity, he had found his true strength, and with it, a future bright with promise and possibility.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.